It doesn't make any sense. And then young people are graduating and they're sending out 100, 200 resumes, getting no job offers. We were sitting here 10 years ago. Every graduate from a decent school was like, I have an Uber, a Coinbase, and a Google offer. Which one should I take for 150K? And those offers just aren't there. So how do we communicate better as an industry? And then what's the advice to young people coming into the workforce?
Yeah, look, every company in, I'll just say Silicon Valley, but broadly in the tech industry, in the startup industry, what was it? Essentially, it looks like a C Corp with a bunch of engineers. But in the world where code self-writes, what is that next level of innovation? What are these companies actually going to do? I think that's ultimately the transition we're going through in what does innovation actually mean. It's going to be less about being able to write code fast. It's much more going to be about systemically how do we adopt this into the world. And capabilities, to your point about ambiguity in the opening, because we don't know about the capabilities of these technologies or how the world's shaping up, there's a lot of ambiguity. So to me, the companies that do really well, and the way we guide the founders, a lot of it is become iterative, constantly change, constantly move forward, as opposed to what used to be before was become precise. Find this narrow edge, create your growth loop, and go build a company. Now it's like constantly iterate. And in order to have the customers give you the license to iterate, it comes down to trust and relationships. So founders that are very good at engaging with customers, building trusting relationships, and say, hey, we're going to go figure this out together. We know how to leverage this technology, but we don't really know where it leads and what the possibilities are. But we co-create. And so the advice I always give is it's all about radical collaboration in this next phase. We got to figure this out together, where different stakeholders that all touch a system are figuring out what this means to them, and then what it means in terms of an overall optimization and the transformation that we can do with it.
You know, one maybe exciting part to this, because I think you framed it as you're a graduate, and how do you get into the workforce, and is it getting tougher? And we did a little bit of work that said, what kind of skills are folks going to need in an AI-infused world? Right, from an employer's point of view, less the startup, but you're more an at-scale enterprise. What can the models not do? Right? And so therefore, what skills will humans play? And the work isn't done, but came back with kind of 3 key ideas. What can the models not do? Aspire, set the right aspiration. Do you go to low Earth orbit? Do you go to the moon? Do you go to Mars? That's a uniquely human capability. So how do you look for the skills about aspiring and getting others to believe in the aspiration?
So leadership and goal setting.
Human.
Judgment.
Right? And we've seen a lot around, in this room, evals, but there's no right and wrong in these models. And so how do you set the right parameters, the architecture, based on firm values, based on societal norms, whatever? How do you build the skills to set what the right parameters are? And then finally, true creativity. Right? The models are inference models. The next most likely step, how do you think about orthogonal stuff? And so some of the work we've been doing with large enterprises, if you believe in some of that, it can take you back to challenging some of your assumptions on where you look for talent. It actually means that where you went to school matters a lot less. And so do you start looking for raw intrinsics? Can you widen the base? Can you actually look at, let's take a tech background, not which university you graduated from, but what does your GitHub profile look like? Let's actually get to the content. And could that actually start meaning that a wider set of people can enter the workforce with different pathways?
One of the things you said, which really resonates, is around creativity. Because when we were going to college, it was all about learn how to solve problems really well, right? And now in a world where we have this technology that can solve problems for us, it really is about asking the right questions. It's like going back to that Socratic dialogue. It is about creativity and who can imagine best what the world is going to look like, and then leverage these technologies to go shape the world towards that, to your point about vision. And teaching our kids, I get this question a lot about how do you want your kids growing up? It's like learning how to ask the right questions versus solving how to, work on hard problems. It's a very different mindset. And it is about curiosity, and kind of back to being kids when you're growing up. It is about challenging your curiosity. Can we actually rethink our pedagogy in a way that we can develop this next generation to be more that than it's 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning and I'm going to factor polynomials because I'm in 7th grade, which is what our system looks like today.
Yeah, the advice I've been giving to young people is there's nobody coming for you. There's no training program. You have to make that for yourself.
Figure it out.
And do not go in through the front door with a resume. Just email the CEO of the company and redesign their landing page and say, these are the 3 things that I think could be better. And I saw you speak on this podcast. I think your company's incredible. I would love to come work there. And I did this spec work. Now people are like, why should I do free work? To get a job, to prove you actually have a skill that is meaningful. You're not going to be able to get into a training program. So many folks now in corporate America, especially the people who are onboarding people, are just like, hiring somebody and training them is going to take longer than building an agent. I can build an agent. Young people coming into the workforce I have to train are annoying. Setting up an agent who just does the work is easy. That's the game on the field right now that people don't want to talk about, which means to stand out, you're going to have to show chutzpah. You're going to have to show drive. You're going to have to show passion. And what college is doing that? What college is teaching that? What course is that?
Look, I think there's a massive gap in resilience.
Yes.
Resilience. Because what you've got under that is you're going to get knocked down.
Yeah.
Right? The question is, do you get back up?
Yeah.
And how do you get back up? And I think the educational system today doesn't necessarily build institutional or individual capability in resilience.
If we could wave a magic wand, just to go off on a complete tangent here, what should the education system look like in 2026? Because you're buying businesses. You have one in healthcare. That's one of the 3 hardest businesses to make change in historically. The other 2 here in America that have the most regulation, are the most expensive, and are the hardest, and that Americans are suffering under the most, are housing and education. Those are the 3 big ones. Yeah. When I run for president, that's going to be my platform, is those 3. Yeah. I'm going to solve those 3. But go ahead and solve education for us right now. And are you going to buy a college next?
Transform.
And transform?
Am I basically buying all the businesses that make no money? Is that where we're going? I would say...
No, the businesses that are the most...
Yeah, but the ones that need to endure for the longest, actually. That's the way I look at it. So here's the thing about education. This idea that we spend 22 years learning and then we spend 40 years working is a broken idea. If the learning of technology and the development of technology is going to be so dynamic. So what about going from a 4-year college to a lifelong college? Which is actually your relationship with learning is that it's a lifelong skilling and reskilling kind of an experience. We've talked about this before as well. I mean, there's some innovative college presidents that are thinking about that, which is, first of all, better business, better lifetime value if you're a college and you actually have a client or a student, for perpetuity versus paying it for 4 years, and much more useful for us to be able to go and have that capability and constantly learn what these technologies are doing and how the workforce is evolving and how to stay ahead in terms of where the opportunity is. So learning has to become much more fluid, and we need to become a community of lifelong learners as we adapt to a world where AI is being diffusing, through us over the years.
And I would just add, I'm with you on this, and that the system built close to 700 years ago was designed around a high fixed cost, libraries and professors, to then take you out for a finite period of time to learn, and then effectively you're set off into the workforce. If you start to think about the half-life of skills getting shorter and shorter, and we've done some work at our Global Institute that said for an employer, the return on investment that you give an employee in terms of skills has shrunk by about half over the last 30 years. It used to be about 7 years return. It's less than 4 years, so about 3.6 years now return. And that's only getting shorter and shorter as things change. So if you believe that, I think you start to pivot to, are we teaching people to continue to learn new things as opposed to master a particular subject? Do you have that ability? One of the things that we've now indexed on, and I mentioned this 40,000 and 25,000, that is the number of humans we have and the number of personalized agents we have as of last week in McKinsey. And I think we'll be at parity before by the end of this year.
So you're literally deploying agents that can do a full 360-degree trusted job function.
Absolutely.
Where is it working really well and where is it not working well?
It works when you have a specific domain area that ultimately where value can be created. So for us, that's in structured problem solving, it's in around search and synthesis, it's around more effective communication, these types of domain areas. But where I was going with this, so the skill is, are you skilling people to actually become superhuman by leveraging agents.
Right.
That becomes a skill. And I don't think we're actually equipping that right now. It's a bit more random or sometimes actually excluded in the classroom as opposed to embracing it and figuring out how do you actually take advantage of it.
It's almost like we need to train people to go from being part of the orchestra to everybody being the conductor and everybody having their own orchestra of agents working for them. And I always look to startups because they're resource constrained. And I was at a dinner in Singapore and I had a dozen founders there. And I said, has anybody, hired anybody in the last, 60 days? They all raised their hands. And then I said, okay, how many of you have an HR person who wrote the job description? Nobody raised his hand. I said, how many of you typed into an LLM, write a job description for this? All 12 hands go up. So now you think just HR. The entire blocking and tackling of it has been writing the job description and sorting through the resumes. So then I asked the next question, which was, how did you sort through the resumes coming in? And they said half of them had built agents to sort through the resumes and stack rank them using AI. And I said, whoa, holy cow. Like, this is like the typing pool, the mail room, the photo. For those of you who are under 40 years old, we had a room which is called the typing pool. Then we had one called the mail room where packages came in, messengers. All those went away. That floor of the building got redeployed. And I think that's what we're going to see, like the HR department, the legal department, all getting compressed. Really interesting.
It's already happening. And I think as we think about our own transformation for our own business, we basically say every department needs to have AI teammates. Now, are those AI teammates like the co-pilot or pilot? Can you fully empower them to do stuff, or are they giving you efficiency? That depends on how well the technology works, how complex the problem is, how severe the problem is. So like in healthcare, for example, if it's life and death decisions, you want humans making those today because that technology isn't as reliable. So I think sort of having a framework, but saying every one of your departments is going to have these AI agents. If you're not doing that, then you're not preparing yourself for this next phase. And that's a lot of what you're seeing. You're already going to be one-to-one. That's an enormous ratio.
Well, but the problem, I think, Jason, that you alluded to earlier in this, there's all this potential. But folks aren't thinking through the dynamic implications in their enterprise model versus the static. So the static might be, hey, there's all these departments. I can apply this. I'll radically shrink it. I'll reduce the number of layers in an organization. I may slow hiring on the inbound, to your point. The dynamic is, okay, but what does your company look like in 5 years' time? And what I often ask a CEO is, okay, you're doing all this stuff. What's the pathway to your job? How does somebody get to your job in the org of the future? You had a pathway. It's not going to be that same pathway. But if you don't hire inbound folks, you can't continually laterally bring in a CEO.
It's literally like taking the bottom 4 rungs off the ladder to save money today.
Yeah. How do you get up?
Everybody's jumping up trying to get in the organization. It's like, well, we don't have a path there. You're going to have to be really thoughtful about making that investment. And it feels like the first 2 years of AI were about cutting jobs. And we really need to think about, hey, it's not just about efficiency, it's about opportunity.
Exactly. What's that other 25%? Right? That's what I think we got to lean into.
Let's take a little diversion here before I open my box.
The black box.
My box here of all the great CES innovations over the last 20 years. Physical AI. We've been talking here very cerebrally about what's happening in enterprises, what's happening in software. But you have self-driving is probably the theme. I would dub 2026 CES as self-driving CES. I will dub 2027 as robotics, humanoid robotics specifically. We're starting, obviously people are showing off all these incredible robots here, but I think consumers will be experiencing them in 27. But consumers are experiencing this year self-driving. Neuro and Lucid have an incredible product. Zoox has been here. Obviously, Elon's doing great things with Robotaxi. Feels like he's closing in on a solution and getting very close. Waymo obviously is leading the pack, but then you also have Baidu, Alibaba, WeRide, Pony AI. This is a global race. What will the world look like in 2026 in terms of self-driving, and then any second and third order impacts of those, and then do the same for robotics?
If you go around the world today, right, you go to Europe, you go to the Middle East, where there is focus on interesting luxury products. There's a market for it. BYD and a lot of these Chinese companies are actually penetrating deeply everywhere because these companies have all the features and functionality, and they're really low cost. And so one thing is that the dynamic of the auto industry, and European automakers are all very dejected because they don't know how they're going to compete with the Chinese industry. US has innovation, self-driving innovation, which allows you to say the next generation of winning automotive companies will take advantage of this platform shift. US has the technology, but it doesn't have the manufacturing capabilities to actually say, can you actually make it as cost effectively as a Chinese maker is going to be? So it's not as easy to figure out how the world order on automotive is going to shift around the world. And so part of the physical AI and the use of AI in manufacturing is to figure out how do you design and manufacture products, next generation products right here in the US in a way that mimics the cost advantages of China, so that then our innovation can then carry the day for us to be the global leaders yet again in this next phase. So we have a company, Rebuild Manufacturing, that's focusing on this, for example. There's a lot of focus that needs to get on that, because if it's self-driving and it's not cost effective, yeah, some of us will buy it, but it's never going to be a mainstream product because cost has, there's a reserve price that really shifts the demand patterns around automotive. And you probably have good data on this as well. We should talk about that. But we got to get the AI right, and we got to get the manufacturing costs right as well.
No, I think that there's a massive coming down the cost curve on this. I'm with you, Jason. I think we're going to see literally over the next 12 to 24 months a massive transformation. I think the race is afoot, right? The race is afoot between let's say a Western stack and a Chinese stack on this. And then in rest of world, it'll be interesting as a battleground to see where that plays out. And you and I were talking a little bit about this. I think that is a massive trend. I think a larger trend will be the trend to robotics, and not just for human interaction, but in manufacturing. And when you think about the challenges that the Western world faces, so take the US. I was talking to the CEO of one of the large contract manufacturers, and she has 50,000 job openings right now for US manufacturing jobs in America that she can't fill. Right? And our demographics aren't getting better on this front. Germany is even worse situation.
Yeah,
Korea
Japan, Germany.
Like another level.
Yeah.
And I think the only way that you build resilient supply chains at the cost point that you're talking about is it's going to be robotics at the heart. And this race, I think, is wide open. Korea leads the way in robots per worker. Right? They're at about 1 to 10 right now. Germany and China are tied at second, and the US then is a distant third. And so there's a real race. You talked about the autonomy thing. I would actually jump to the robotics thing and wonder how do we win this
one of the
race?
issues in robotics is, so when you build the LLMs, you could dump them in the cloud, experiment with something called ChatGPT, and it becomes pervasive. If you have good robotics models, what's next? You don't have a hardware capability that's like an API infrastructure that diffuses those models fast. So like there's a lot that needs to get built. So I actually think robotics will be slower than people think in terms of really taking hold. But it's essential to go lead in that if you're going to lead in manufacturing, and therefore have that core advantage to play up the stack in industries like automotive. There's no other way to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to name drop, but I went 2 Sundays ago, I went to Tesla with Elon, and I went and visited the Optimus lab. There were a large number of people working on a Sunday at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And I saw Optimus 3. I can tell you now, nobody will remember that Tesla ever made a car. They will only remember the Optimus, and that he is going to make 1 billion of those. And it is going to be the most transformative technology product ever made in the history of humanity. Because what LLMs are going to enable those products to do is understand the world and then do things in the world that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
I believe it'll be a 1-to-1 ratio of humans to Optimus, and I think he's already won.